Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, October 3rd. The season should be over today in our minds, but it is not. There are still 3 days worth of games. There is still one playoff spot. I think that is actually up for grabs, and I feel like it is slipping away from my grasp every minute. Every single minute of every day, I feel worse and worse about the Brewers' chances of playing in the postseason.
I have two. Maybe I have 3 leagues that are going to come down to like the last day. So that's my equivalent of your Brewers feeling, where I'm like my main, which is has the most money riding on it, goes from 2nd to 4th every day, like in the back. And I'm just like, no! I'll take 3rd at this point.
I finally got clipped out of the money, I think, in my big auction. I think I'm just far enough back now where I'm not going to catch the teams in cash, but I have other leagues where I'm being chased, so I'm just trying to hold on for a few more days and make it a pretty good season. So we'll see.
I may have this regret. I chose to put so I needed I really need Ks, and it's like really close in Ks and wins. And so I had $2 left. So I made a copy of 2 transactions, right? Where it was like all the starters that would start. And we're talking about Louis Varland was like the last name on, and it was only like, there was like 3 or 4 pitchers that I wanted to roster that had a start left in the season.
Yeah, not many.
And so I put 4 relievers, I put 4 stars together, and they made a copy of it for the second dollar, right? And then I was looking around. I was like, wow, it's pretty close in homers and RBIs too. And I kind of like what Michael Massey's doing. And so then I put Michael Massey on top of the second one. And if I lose if I'm out of second by like 1 or 2 Ks, I'm going to be killing myself.
Oh, no.
But of course, like, the last 3 days are also terrible because, somebody like Drew Rasmussen, it says he's scheduled to pitch against Boston on the last day.
No.
Like, I don't think that's happening. And I think it could happen to anybody. Like, I've got John Heasley, and I'm like, well, he's a young guy. He needs the outing. But anything could happen between now and Wednesday where they're just like, nah, he's got a blister. Like, nah, he's not feeling good. We're just going to do a bullpen game or something, like.
Yeah.
I'm staring at this like last 3 days being like, who of these guys is actually like Ken Waldichuk probably going to start on the last day of the season, but yeah, maybe not.
I think with someone like Waldichuk, it's a little easier to determine whether or not he's hit a predetermined innings limit, because if they weren't going to start him, what incentive did the A's have?
Now, right?
Yeah, like to hide that.
Yeah.
Whereas, a team that is trying to reset everything for the postseason, or maybe it just has innings concerns about it, someone they're relying on, they might make a decision to go shorter with a start. I want you to throw, but you're going to throw 2, 3.
Like Rasmussen could just throw 2 innings.
Yeah, just to keep the arm loose. Yeah, he's not going to pitch again for a few more days, so just or throw one inning, and throw your side session
worst case
in a game.
And then all my drafting holds, it's like, well, let me take out all these useful starters and put in like Merriweather and Griffin Jacks.
Yeah.
Because they're not pitching. So anyway, 3 leagues coming down to it where I can finish. I could, if it all goes right, I could win 2 and finish second in the main. That's how close it is. If it all goes wrong, I could go 3rd, 2nd, 4th.
3rd, 2nd, okay. Yeah,
well, that's pretty bad.
That's a tough way to go out given where you're at right now.
Yeah.
If you were climbing to those positions, I think you'd say that's a pretty good year. But if you slip to those positions, you'd be furious because you saw what could have been.
Yeah. One of my leagues is funny because we do combined roto and head-to-head. So in that one, I'm jockeying for like anywhere from 3rd to 1st. I think it's still on the board, but I'm also in the head-to-head finals. And so it's actually really interesting because it makes it harder to do things like punt a stat, right? Or like, even this head-to-head matchup, I'm so close in the roto that I don't need saves. I could go to an all holds lineup if I wanted. But in my head-to-head matchup, I need another save. So makes it for interesting, like sort of tactical decisions. I kind of like it. It does require work. Like we actually have to have somebody with engineering, programming skills, because they're actually taking stats from the API from CBS and creating a roto leaderboard for our head-to-head league. That's the Pitchfork League. I like that one.
Take fantasy baseball and make it more complicated.
Yeah, right.
Require more advanced skills to play.
You need a programmer on you in your league.
What's wrong with me is that I'm like, that sounds pretty fun. And I know that the correct way to get more people to play this game
is not to have those kind of barriers to entry. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have a programmer in your league. Well, you're just gonna have to play 10-team head-to-head then.
Yes.
Good luck with that.
Auctions with blindfolds on,
like
no technology. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting on a few leads right now. I think if the season ended right now, I'd win 7 different leagues. I don't think that's gonna. I mean, something's got to go. Enough of those are close enough where it could end up being 4. And
that's better. That's better than me. I'm gonna win like 3 or 4. It's not been my best year, but my average finish, I think, is still going to be something like 3 out of 15.
That's good. That's a good year.
It's a good year. And like any year that you like set a points record and by 6 points in like a league that's been around since 1975, like I guess I'll take it.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. Well, the main focus of this episode is going to be reliever review, because the season is almost over. We're going to start the series now, because if we didn't, I think it would take until like January to finish it. So the hope is that we'll be able to wrap this up in the next.
In January, we need
weeks.
Preview.
So. Right. We put a P in front and then we go forward.
Start all over again.
So relievers, my dumb way of thinking was they can't change that much in 3 days. I mean, hopefully everyone just stays healthy, because I guess that's the one thing that would really change our minds about, even still from a value perspective, it wouldn't change the season enough for it to matter. We always take a look back, kind of think about what was going on back during draft season. If you go back to draft season, in this case, I was just looking at the first week of April because of the delayed start to the 2022 season. You might remember it was Josh Hader and Liam Hendriks as the big 2. They were the consensus top 2 closers. They were often going around pick 30 if we're talking about NFBC leagues, probably a little bit later than that if we're talking more about Yahoo, CBS, ESPN type home leagues.
0 shares. Actually, I lie. In my main, I have Hader. I picked him up 2 weeks ago on waivers. So
wow,
0. That's actually, I mean, I think that is a little bit illustrative of Josh Hader's season.
That's the English pronunciation, right?
I know, sorry.
Okay, yeah. No, it's okay. I'm just
Hader did not return value above.
He's pretty bad on the auction calculator.
Hader was a $0 pitcher according to the auction calculator. That's a big yikes for me, dude. And you know what's funny is that his stuff is still pretty much there. You know, I might have picked him if he'd slid to me anywhere, but the command was legendarily bad this year.
It was. I think we've wanted to know for a few weeks, what did the end of the season look like, and what will the postseason look like for Hader? If he goes back to dominant looking self,
he's the one that actually there could be a lot of change between now and the time we start doing the previews.
Take a small sample of second half innings and tack on another small sample of postseason innings and draw a meaningful conclusion from that. Good luck. The best I can do is if you go back to September 7th, he's 5 for 5, I believe, in save chances during that span. 12 Ks and 8 2/3 innings. Only 1 walk, no homers allowed.
Yeah, from watching him,
like Hader.
Command is, his command. I mean, he still doesn't have great command. Like he'll be like trying to throw a pitch up and in, and it'll end up out and out and up. But I think he's either finding better places to miss or just getting refining the command just a little bit. So
right. all of this is to say, I've started to sketch out those 2023 rankings a little bit. I think Hader is still going to be in what was previously the circle of trust, which is about 8 to 10 closers that we wanted to have on our teams. That's the furthest he could fall, and there's a chance that he's still probably within that top 5.
5th or something? Yeah, 4th.
Yeah, on the rough draft, he's 7th right now, but that's like 7th with an up arrow.
Mm-hmm.
It still looks pretty good. Most of the guys in the top group are still going to be in or near the top group. The order is just different. I mean, Hendriks has done a lot since coming off the IL to slowly push himself back up the board as well. I could look at Liam Hendriks right now and say that he has a case to probably be closer 2, closer 3.
And he ended up in a relatively down year, 7th on the auction calculator. However, when you look, and here's the auction calculator results. It was Clase first, Helsley second, Edwin Diaz third, Daniel Bard fourth, Jordan Romano fifth, Kenley Jansen sixth, Liam Hendriks seventh. So there are guys ahead of him that I will not put ahead of him. I'm not the shape of Kenley Jansen's season doesn't leave me in a good spot with him. Daniel Bard still pitches in Colorado. So those two at the very least are going to go slot behind Hendriks. So I don't know. It's somewhat tempting when you look at it to be like, man, that's just the order. It's like Clase, Helsley, Diaz, Romano, Hendriks, Hader. Like argue me off of that.
I think you have to put Diaz at the top of your closer rankings right now. Not because of the entrance video or the entrance music, but because the strikeout rate is just on its own level. And you're talking about a guy that has comparable control to the other guys in this group, even though it's slightly a higher walk rate than Hendriks and Presley, and it's a higher walk rate than Clase. Just the best all-around closer right now based on skills. You look at your pitching model. Things look fine there too. This group stacks up very similarly to each other across the board.
Clase has better stuff plus and better location plus, so he ends up as a better pitching plus candidate than Edwin Diaz. But it's instructive to remember that stuff plus is trained against all outs, where fantasy is based on strikeouts. So Clase's cutter is an elite sort of run suppression pitch, but isn't necessarily one that returns as many strikeouts as Diaz will have. So yeah, I can agree with that. I was speaking a little bit more generally of like what my top 7, who's in my top 7.
Yeah. I would agree.
I think there's going to be some ordering concerns. Whereas like Helsley, how much do you worry about someone who's sort of come on the scene so quickly? His pitching plus though is very good. The stuff plus is very good. Romano's had some ups and downs, but going into the season, I was always trying to get someone that you referred to the circle of trust. I was always trying to get like the last one of that. So going into the season in my drafts, I had a goal of getting as much Ryan Presley and Jordan Romano as I could.
Yeah. And until Presley had that knee injury pop up, I was very much in on Presley. He was the guy I wanted the most. I think he's my most rostered pitcher across all my leagues this year. And that was with a late season move away from him and even backing off some of the top end closers because the prices kept ticking up even more as we got closer to opening day. But Presley's velocity has come back a bit in the second half. So I think any lingering concerns we had through the first half about the velo being down, those have been erased, and he's got the contract. I don't really see the warts there.
Even when his velo was down, his stuff plus was decent because he's got an amazing breaking ball.
Yeah.
It's like why Rich Hill has just always still had pretty good stuff plus, because he's just a great breaking ball. So I think I believe in him. I do think he's maybe last in the circle of trust this year. Maybe Hader and him are last in the top 7, 8, because of just over time relievers lose velocity and their performance is tied more to their velocity. So just having a season where he had a lost velocity, that worries me. Plus he's an old reliever and there's going to be some effect of the pitch clock, I believe. And I think that if there is a pitch clock effect, it's going to be mostly to older relievers. So, all those combined, I think he's still in the circle of trust, but he's right at the end. And I have to say, the end of the circle of trust is where seasons can be like you can lose your league. Like I honestly, I kind of think that, because if I look back at where the end of the circle of trust was going into the season, just looking at this, for me, Kimbrel, Chapman, and Gallegos. So I liked Romano, and you're saying that he had sort of an 85 ADP going in.
Yeah,
and
Chapman
82, Kimbrel 88, Gallegos 117. That was death, dude. That was an awful place to live. And even though I plucked Romano out of it, I feel good about that. I do have leagues where I missed Romano and ended up with Kimbrel and Gallegos, and that was no good. So, it may be instructive once you find like you're identifying your circle of trust going into the second season. It may be instructive to really hone in on the second to last guy, so that you're not getting, that Kimbrel situation or that Chapman situation, especially with this tweak of like going to a pitch clock and these older pitchers being slower. Like as bad as old as Chapman has been, do we think he's going to get better? Like Presley could be a Kimbrel or Chapman. You know what I mean? Like they're talking about a guy like Kimbrel and Chapman still look good in Stuff Plus model, right? But they're older. They've shown some weaknesses. Is Helsley? Is there any chance that Presley is the next Chapman or Kimbrel for next year?
Always a chance. I think the age argument is the best possible argument you can make.
Skills better, but
skills difference too, though. I think about Chapman always having issues with walks. He's always had that. Kimbrel in more recent years has struggled with his command. Like those guys but they had, even though they had even higher strikeout ceilings, they did have a clear downside when they were good. Whereas Presley should age more gracefully, but you're right. The changing variable with the pitch clock is at least worth keeping on our minds. I expect him to be in my group of closers that I still want, especially if the price isn't higher than it was this year. If it actually comes down a little bit, I think that still is going to make a lot of sense. I keep looking at Raisel Iglesias and thinking, what exactly did anyone do wrong by drafting him? This seems like a bad luck sort of outcome, that he was traded and went like a month out of save before he got traded just because the Angels weren't creating save chances. I'm convinced that there's nothing wrong in your process if you were drafting Iglesias in that range throughout this draft season. Because skills-wise, he was still good.
Didn't you get some value out of him, though?
Yeah, you get a half season's worth. You got 17 saves. You got half as many saves as he had last season. Strikeout rate was down just a little bit from a year ago.
So
skills
basically
very good.
Back end top 20, looks like.
Which is disappointing given the extra
investment
amount you had to pay. But at the same time,
like he's hanging out with a lot of waiver wire closers like David Robertson, John Duran, and Jorge Lopez.
But what are you going to do? Take a look at some guy that has the job and good skills on a good team that gets drafted in the top 75 overall and say, oh, there's a chance this team's going to crater. And if they crater, they might actually trade him. We don't know. Like that's not, there's nothing actionable there, I guess is what I keep coming back to. That's just.
And what I like about Iglesias is that he could easily be the closer in Atlanta next year. And one thing that we just learned, I think, a little bit from Chapman and Kimbrel is that these older closers with poor command, like it's pitching plus. Actually, I have to remind myself all the time because I'm so into Stuff Plus. It's pitching plus that does really well predicting how a reliever does. Right? It does. It is important to have command. And so if you look at Kimbrel, his Stuff Plus is still good. His command is actually above average. Is a little bit surprising, but Chapman is the real obvious one where his Stuff Plus is still top 10 in the league. His Location Plus is 88.6. Like there's nobody else as low as that, and even last year he wouldn't have had that. So other really high stuff, low location guys that people might depend on next year. Clay Holmes is pretty bad. Ryan Stanek is pretty bad. Josh Hader has a 91 location plus. Maybe he's actually your next Aroldis Chapman, you know? So it is instructive to sort of remember that command matters, and that especially with an older pitcher, they can't just outstuff their bad command at some point. I think that's the story of Chapman, really.
Right. And I think with Raisel Iglesias, we've talked about him before as a closer that doesn't have a prototypical closer's arsenal, right? More pitches than most closers, with fastball, slider, change all being used heavily. That, to me, gives him a softer landing as well. It's sort of like Presley. I do think you're right to put Hader and Chapman in the same bucket because of their command issues, because of their ceilings. Like they seem like they'd be on more similar paths to each other. So,
but I still like the idea of identify a circle of trust, 5 to 7 pitchers that you like, that you think are number one closers and will keep the job all year, that sort of deal. And then don't buy the first 2 and don't buy the last 2. That's the one like caveat I've tried to put, because I've been fairly successful with relievers this year. The model's been really great for that. And, I think it's going to be again, but, when I made the mistake of being like, well, I'll just get the last guy in my circle of trust, right? Gallegos is in the circle of trust, right? No, he isn't. So I like this idea of like, trying to play the middle on that, because I'm still not going to buy a closer in the second or third.
Well, team intentions, I think, can still be pretty difficult to read. I mean, I think until recently, Gallegos was still showing up and getting a decent number of saves, even though I think a lot of the saves he was getting in August were on the back of Helsley pitching in front of him.
Twice,
Helsley got the win.
Helsley got the 8th, yeah.
And Gallegos ended up getting a save there. But I think 7 of the last 8 saves the Cardinals have generated have gone to Helsley in September. So that one might be tilting far enough in Helsley's favor where he ends up inside the circle, but maybe near that back end range. I thought Corey Knebel, from a skills perspective, because he'd done it before and because it looked like he was healthy a year ago, I actually thought that was a good fit in Philly. I thought he was a good second closer if you didn't get 2 out of the group initially, back when I was trying to get 2 from that first 8 to 10. I thought Taylor Rogers actually made a lot of sense in San Diego. The home run issues he's been dealing with more recently are a bit surprising to me.
Yeah.
I'm just not really sure how major league teams view him. I think I'm a little bit disoriented when it comes to understanding how he'll be used, because the Twins never really, they didn't always use him as a regular closer. The Padres did, but then the Padres were willing to trade him in the Hader deal. And then, of course, in Milwaukee, he ended up being a fallback option to Devin Williams after the trade. So I don't know if Rogers hits free agency and gets scooped up and some team says, you're our guy, go get 30 saves. I think he's capable of it in the right circumstances. I just don't know if I'm willing to take that chance, team unknown, in the early part of the draft season.
Yeah, he's played his way out of any sort of circle of trust. Like he's at this point a guy that you pick up in the end game because you think he might end up closing for the Pirates, or closing for somebody where he gets picked up. I don't think he's second tier. But looking at that second tier, the thing that I think is just that's awful. And so I wanted to look real quickly at my leaderboard in the main for saves here. Dude, I got 58 saves. That's good for 6th. And this is a league where I kind of messed up. Like, I think this was a league where I had Gallegos or something. 77 is first place in saves. And that's not always instructive, because that's like, oh, that's the one guy who like bought, Hendriks and like bought 3 closers really high, right? Maybe it is. I'm not actually looking at the details. I like to look about second or third. Like if you can get second or third in every category, then you're going to win the league.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's a good way to look at it. 69
is third and 70 is second. So I think 70 saves is your benchmark. Now think about this. Let's say you do what I'm saying, and you've got the front 2 you're not going to get, in the back 2, and so you're getting someone that's 3rd to 5th. You're getting Ryan Helsley, or you're getting who's going to be 3rd to 5th. Maybe you get Hendriks again. Maybe you get. Presley would, I think, be at the back end. Let's say you just get Hendriks again. All right. You got the fourth best reliever on your board, and you got him in the 5th round or whatever. How many saves you're banking for? You thinking 35, 40?
Yeah, you probably. Can you really project anyone for more than 30? Because even as great as Edwin Diaz has been on a team that's been battling for or holding on to first place most of the year,
you just spent to get a good one, right?
Yeah,
you're not skimping. Let's give you 35. That's half of the saves you need.
Right. Well, if you get 2 very good closers, you can get it from 2. The odds of being right on both and getting them is hard.
This is my argument. Don't get a second closer. Like, don't buy in that tier. Listen how bad this is. This is the closers 2s, right? Knievel, Rogers, Barlow. He's the good one, but
Barlow's pretty good. Yep.
Soto, Kittredge, McGee, Doval, Barnes, Bednar, Trevino. Listen, what's your success rate there? It seems like it's less than 50%. We could count it.
They're at least in this group, though.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I mentioned 11, and I call the misses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 11 were misses.
How many of those players do we like based on skills, though? Many of those players.
I ended up with some of those hits. I liked Soto the best out of that group. Doval was somebody I liked, but I was a little bit nervous that they wouldn't give him saves all year.
I think a lot of people liked Bednar. I don't know why he came out so cheap if so many people liked him, but people liked Bednar.
I didn't really like any of those other guys, but I did like, Kittredge had some good stuff plus numbers. Barnes always has okay stuff plus numbers. And I had, I don't know if I had a share of Rogers, but there wasn't a reason to hate Rogers. It was just, I don't like shopping in this tier is my overall point. You know what I mean? And 7 out of 11, even if you think you can identify the 4, it's just not a good place to live. So you identify the 4 in the next group and then just wait forever because that doesn't seem like it's worth investment. Like, what else went in the 150s? I'm sure there were some great position players and starting pitchers that went in the 150s.
Well, you're not dealing with role uncertainty with position players in that group. You know the players that are being drafted there as hitters, unless they are very young players or prospects, their playing time's not going to just disappear, or the aspect of their playing time that makes them relevant to our game isn't going to just vanish.
Yeah. I think I want to have one closer out of the top 75 picks, and then I'm going to take 125 picks off from taking closers. And then maybe jump in and do 2. If I did that last year, I would get Ryan Presley or Jordan Romano, a lot of leagues like that. I would miss out on Bednar and Soto, which, I had a lot of leagues that did have that. And then if I just started shopping at 200, and actually I could get Bednar at 200. Maybe Soto falls to me. He was 177 overall. But I could maybe double tap and I would get like Bednar and Barlow at 200 or Seawald 288. Seawald. Should we not be afraid of picking the best reliever in a crowded bullpen?
That would be part of the best argument for only taking one in the circle. And let me back up even more. Like, I am very hesitant to go top shelf, pick 25, pick 30, pick 35 for Edwin Diaz or Clase or whoever ends up there. I agree with you that you want to get at least one within this group of 7 or 8 that we like to try and have a clear 30 with good ratios and a good K rate. And then watching out in this 100 to 200 range totally makes sense.
Landmine after landmine.
There's a chance that you'll identify a couple of relievers that do go in that range that you actually like. And if they're there at the appropriate time, you can take them. This is a general outline of a strategy. This is not a rigid, you must do this way. This is just a way to think about it. If you're waiting, I think you're probably taking 2 chances in what look like clear committees on guys with good skills. So that would be the Paul Sewald types, right? You have to get 2 players like that because there's a chance that one gets a smaller share than expected or gets no share at all. And then you're left with just the one closer you have. And if you're pushing 30 to 35 saves, you're probably sitting more like 3 to 5 standings points in the category, most likely somewhere in that range. You're not at the bottom, but you're chasing on the wire throughout the season, which is fine because if you do find one, you'll get mid-pack and you could still be okay mid-pack.
And how many do we find this year? I mean,
from out of nowhere,
Ryan
Daniel
Helsley,
Bard
second
kind of counts.
Best reliever.
Yeah, Ryan Helsley for
second
sure.
best reliever, 4th best reliever, Daniel Bard.
Clay Holmes.
9th is Evan Phillips, but it's just it's without the saves. You know, I'm not going to shop for that. We still need
Felix Bautista.
Yeah,
out of nowhere.
Did Devin Williams get drafted a lot?
I think Williams was drafted, cut, and then picked up after the Tatum trade.
Up again. Yeah,
right, because you can't wait forever.
Jason Adam, Alexis Diaz are $6 pitchers with saves.
Jorge Lopez was basically either free at the end of the draft or quickly an early season pickup. He was valuable for a while. So they happen. They emerge.
A lot, all the time. I think I like this idea of, the perfect bill in the perfect pen going, like if I went back in time, it would be Romano at, maybe I have to jump him a little bit to make sure I get him, especially in this thing that we're talking about. You said Romano went 85. That's 6th round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
15 teamer, 6th round.
Let's say I take him at the end of the 5th. So Romano at 75. And then I don't jump Bednar or Soto, and I take one of them. I take Bednar or Soto at 205 or 215. Like Bednar's at 215, right? And then it's not a good place to shop. Like Joe Barlow, Robert Suarez, Paul Sewald, Bender. Who's Bender? Anthony Bender, Art Warren. If you shopped in there, you got a half season from Barlow and a full season from Sewald, but you also missed 3 times. So I would take one of those guys at 300. So that's my general approach.
Yeah, like David Robertson was actually
Romano at 75. Yeah, Romano at 75. And this is not revisionist, like, oh yeah, like anybody can look back and like create the perfect, like that's literally what my plan was. And there are teams where I kind of nailed that. So I'm gonna continue that sort of plan where it's like, yeah, identify a second closer you like, buy one, but don't buy one in the top 200. Just wait.
I do think there's also a difference. We're at that point in the year where if you play draft and hold, which, those are leagues where you don't get to make in-season pickups, you do have to think about this a little bit differently, especially if you're drafting in the fall or the early part of the winter when there are players that haven't moved yet. You have an even smaller list of players where you kind of understand the role and the situation. So I think you go early and then you speculate late and you hope to hit. And I think that's where Sewald and Devin Williams were particularly helpful because they still had value even if they weren't closing as often as they're closing right now. So there was another way they could be helpful in those leagues. So I think that's
like I've played some Griffin Jacks like in draft and holds. So I just needed the innings. I needed some Ks, didn't end up the closer, but yeah. I do agree that maybe I'll take like a closer in the 3rd round on the in draft and holds.
Milo Doval for a second, just looking at this group, because I'm looking at that cluster of mostly misses. Melanson, we talked about me being dumb and in a league where I was just desperate, caving in. It was an important league where I should have just done something completely different, had value somewhere else. But, Camilo Doval, I think, is a very good reliever. I think there's still one more level he can reach. We did see the walk rate tick up a little bit from where it was last season. The K rate is down slightly, but the home run rate improved. And we know the ballpark is good. It seems like they're pretty comfortable using him as that guy. 27 saves, to me, is a pretty successful season. especially for someone as young as
Dude.
Doval is. So I wonder if he ends up being a good value.
He has some crazy up and down over the course of the season and Stuff Plus. I don't even get it. In late August, he was throwing up 77s in Stuff Plus. What the F is going on there?
How does that happen?
I do know one thing. He started the season with lesser velo than he ended the season. And Stuff Plus really does like the last sort of 6 to 7 appearances of the season where he's kind of living in the 140s for Stuff Plus. Just to give you a context, Emmanuel Clase was 144 for the season. So I do think that Doval has Clase-like upside. And I think that's a good name to think of because he is a guy who throws like a 100-mile-an-hour cutter, just like Clase. It's a little bit worrisome to me that he threw his best velo at the end of the season. And in context with beat writers and Gabe Kapler having an open conversation about maybe Doval hadn't been prepared to throw his best stuff at the beginning of the season.
Don't know.
Do you but there's that. I love sort of trying to read between the lines and trying to learn from those sort of things and being like, oh, he doesn't prepare well over the off season. Yeah, well, he just saw the benefits of increasing his preparation and doing his arm care and just went from sitting like 97, 98 in the early season to sitting at 102 at the end of the season. Maybe he saw the benefits of this. Maybe he's actually learned something from this and he's going to come in next year ready to pump 100s from the beginning of the season.
And maybe the communication in different aspects of just the relationship between player and organization will evolve to the point where they have a better plan together that can be executed on. Not that the Giants,
and that's sort of how Kapler put it. We both learned from the course of the season. Like Doval, like ranking Doval versus Presley, that'll be difficult.
I mean, I think initially, at least, you're going to see Doval probably ends up somewhere in the Gallegos range, like outside the top 100 overall in ADP for the early part of draft season. But you could, if we're talking about him now and the way you're talking about him as someone that throws that hard, that does have those similarities to Clase, people are going to see that and understand that. Mm-hmm. And they're gonna gradually become more and more confident in him. So I think
he'll move up draft boards.
He's going to get into the circle.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have a decision, probably not unlike the first time you had to really trust Jordan Romano, where you say, okay, do we really believe that he's this good? Is it okay to pay the premium? Is it okay to use pick 80, pick 85, pick 90 on Camilo Doval? And
that's exactly it. And I'm saying that maybe your circle of trust is 8, but Brian Presley and Josh Hader are at the bottom of the circle of trust. And maybe Doval is the guy you have to take ahead of those guys.
Wow. Yeah. That's that is a decision I am not ready to make, which is
relievers. The relievers, it's a hard MF in life, dude. like not only like I was looking at this for who's the lefty in Miami? I think we even mentioned this before.
Tanner Scott.
No, it's the lefty that just came out of nowhere ish this year for them. I'll find him in a second. Anyway, he what is it? Why can't I think he's not on the? He must be hurt. Anyway, I can find him here. Pitching stats, leaders, IP. Steven Okert. Steven Okert is 31 years old. He has been pitching in an organization since 2012. He has 135 major league innings. He's a pretty good pitcher. This year they say he was below replacement, but I don't believe it. He struck out 29% of the batters he saw this year. Totally usable lefty. He will be a free agent in 2027.
Oh yeah, no, he's got that's like a worse than Whit Merrifield situation.
Oh my God, dude. He's gonna be a free agent in 2027, dude. I don't even know if he's gonna get a free agent deal in his life. You know what I mean?
No, he should take an extension.
He should be 36 years old. Oh man. And if you look at there's aging curves. Bill Petty has these excellent aging curves he did on pitching. And if you look at velo for starting pitchers and relievers, I would like someone to rerun those. I would like to see more recent aging curves for velo, given that we're like in the weighted ball driveline era. I'd like to see if maybe pitchers hold on to their velo longer. But the way that it was is like everybody around 26 years old just starts losing velo. And for the starting pitchers, velo just goes down, but strikeout rate doesn't go down as badly because they've got other pitches, they've got moxie, they've got feel. There's Max Scherzer in my column today was just like yelling at me about how Stuff Plus doesn't have feel in it. And I'm like, well, it's sort of designed that way, but okay. They managed to age okay. Relievers just see their strikeout rate die with their velo. So that's what I was sort of saying with the Ryan Presley thing. We saw it. We saw the end. We previewed the end. That's what it's going to look like for him at the end of being a closer.
Well, wait a minute. I got to push back a little bit. Like that's what we've seen historically. Now that we know that that's what happens to relievers, don't you think that we try and do things differently with relievers going forward?
Yeah. So Oh, you mean like as a team in terms of developing them?
Right. Teams could say, wait a minute. Okay, we know as velocity drops over time that relievers become
so we want you to have multiple pitches.
Do you start to work on those second and third pitches more often with your relievers as velocity drops?
I would like to see some, but I saw no evidence that I looked recently and I saw no evidence that relievers these days have more pitches than relievers in the past.
Which, that's to me, that's the thing you would want to change. You'd say we want our relievers to have more pitches.
Yeah, but then if they have multiple pitches in command, then why aren't they starting?
I think you want to give yourself a chance of salvaging something later.
Aging better, yeah.
Even if you only have one pitch you really trust and one that is just there to keep hitters from sitting entirely on that pitch. That's where a lot of relievers are.
Anecdotally, I'm 100% with you, and I thought that I would find something because as you think of like Adam Ottavino adding a cutter, there's a lot of pitchers that are just like, oh, I needed to add something that was in between these two pitches, to make it really work. But in terms of the numbers, in terms of average number of pitches thrown over 10% of the time, I couldn't find a difference between now and the past. So anyway, the way that I was going to make this relevant in terms of fantasy is that like, I will take Camilo Doval over Ryan Presley.
Okay.
I took Romano this year. I took Romano. I know it's helium, but we have this model that tells us how good people are in short samples. And we also have this fact of velo just dropping as you get older. And then we have this third fact of the pitch clocks coming in and older pitchers being slower. So it's like, this could be a kind of confluence of like the year of the young closer,
I like it. I like it as a
not a great time to be Kenley Jansen, the slowest pitcher in baseball.
But I like this as a reason for sifting through some of these guys that are kind of clustered together.
Yes. I'm not going to say that like I'm going to take Clay Holmes and make him number one. Was there another example, or like Duran, especially since like maybe they stretch him out or something, like I'm not going to take, the flavor of the month young guy and just put him all the way to the top. But if we're talking about 7th and 8th, I'm gonna take the young guy, put him 7th. You know what I mean? And that's sort of what I was talking about. I think Doval is going to end up being in that back end of Circle of Trust by the time we're drafting, Mains again next year.
Yeah, I think that's how the market is going to treat him.
And if Helsley goes as like the 5th best reliever next year, I want him. If he goes like as the 2nd best reliever in like the 2nd round or 3rd round, then I'll be like, okay, that's helium.
That's a little extreme. Right. I think the decision that everyone has to make is, are you willing to take 2 from the group if you're not taking 1 from the very beginning? Are you comfortable using
that worked out
5th and 6th round picks or some combination like that?
That was awful. That worked really poorly for me.
I think it's more of a wheel strategy. I get both picks together. I know exactly which 2 I'm going to get. I'm not at the mercy of someone else messing it up.
Still,
Maybe
we
that's the
showed how
thing.
bad that was to shop in that neighborhood. Like, I think I did that once, and I even did that once where I lifted up Soto and did like Bednar Soto in like the 7th and 8th round or something. Like, jumped them was like a max. I might have been a max pick on Bednar in that league, and like I still wouldn't recommend doing that.
No, I'm more like saying Presley Duvall or some
Yeah.
group up there where you didn't go all the way to the top, but you stayed two within that group. It's got to be the right position on the draft
Yeah.
board to do it. But
It's still
that's
tough
still
because
tempting.
you're still trying to, like, you have all these like competing things in your head. You're like, oh, I want to come out of 5 rounds with 2 starting pitchers. Okay, well, I want to double tap on the second level relievers. Wait, I just took 4 pitchers in the first 5 rounds.
Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's 1 hitter and 4 pitchers.
Toby, Batflip Toby's like, yeah.
Yeah, Dalton Del
And
Don's
he
like,
does
take
well.
7 straight pitchers. Like, what are you taking?
Toby does really well with that sort of strategy. It's like, I don't know. I have I'd be like trying to click my body would like, they'd be like, error, cannot click. You're like, why? Just do it.
So you mentioned earlier that we should consider embracing the committees. And I think there's kind of just a necessary evil here to do that, because if you look at year over year trends, I just ran a simple search over at StatHead looking for number of 20 save pitchers in a season. This is going to shock absolutely no one. Last season, we only had 19 pitchers get to 20 plus saves. This year, we're sitting at 18 with 3 days left. So it's probably going to be pretty much the same number. I think there's a couple of guys sitting right around that total.
Other number that's going up to claim that is like the number of 10 saves relievers going up.
Right. This isn't just guys breaking, right? This is,
like there has been analysis that like there's fewer teams that are giving like 95% of their chances to one player.
Let's have a look. Let's run the same search with 10 or more saves in a season and see what that trend looks like. The reason I think this is important, though, is because for years, I think the first thing we've wanted to do is avoid committees. I'll just avoid it. It's a mess. We don't know who's going to get the job.
Yeah.
Or if this is too expensive, don't bother, because it could be a share. Mm-hmm. And the thing I've realized, the more we've seen this, is that committee doesn't mean equal. Doesn't mean 3 guys are splitting the shares 3 even ways. It's, we use this guy 3/4 of the time. We use the other guy about almost a quarter of the time, and then the last like 5% go to this third person. That's the way we use this committee. And it's like, okay, well, if you're getting the person who's getting 3/4 of those chances, that's fine. That's still a committee, but that's still very usable. To answer your question about 10 save relievers, we're at 33 10 save relievers this season. We had 39 a year ago. We had 37 back in 2019.
So those are still going down too.
40, 42. Yeah, this is pretty consistently the same for the last 15 years.
Well, I mean, you look at some teams that, are good teams that seem okay with doing bullpen pie committee. The Dodgers are currently doing it. The Yankees are currently doing it. Phillies have a timeshare.
The Dodgers made a trade. Well, they had Blake Trinan, so maybe they were going to do what they did with Kimbrel with Trinan. But the Dodgers should be a committee team in theory, and they weren't until Kimbrel failed.
Yeah. Even at the beginning of the season, I thought it would be a Trinan Kimbrel committee. That's a little bit confused by injury, though. But like the Rays go in every year, like being a committee, but then at certain parts of the year, Pete Fairbanks was the closer. The Mariners looked like they were a committee going in, and they had a really great thing, and then Sewell became their primary closer, basically. So I think that, embrace the committee to me means don't be afraid of it and pick, and those are opportunities for you to pick the winner. And you're still hoping that there's a winner. And then what's nice about that too is, you've got this model that tells you the good pitchers, you've got projections, you got certain things you can look for to find good pitchers. And there's like the Evan Phillips phenomenon, right? Like phenomenon, which is like, Evan Phillips ended up, where did I say he ended up?
He was top 10 among closers, wasn't he?
Yes,
Among relievers in
top
value?
10 among relievers. But it's that whole like, do I buy Chad Green ahead of the season just to like have great ratios and be a valuable reliever? And at the end of the season, oh look, Chad Green was worth $10 and you got him for $1. Like we should buy Chad Green every year. The problem is that relievers are so volatile that even trying to buy Chad Green, maybe you bought Chad Green this year for $1. You're like, finally, I'm going to do the one where I just buy a guy who's a reliever that's not going to get me saved, but he's going to be worth $10 at the end of the season. You messed up. Like you can't always find the Chad Green. But when you buy into a closer situation, a closer committee situation, you might get just a really good reliever that only has 5 saves on the year, and you might still get a lot of value out of it. So, and you're spending less.
Yeah, I think that's the key is if you're getting these guys well outside the top 200 overall, there's plenty of value that can be had there. I think the problem with Kittredge, he got hurt. That's random. You can't control that. Players are going to get hurt. The problem with Kittredge is that he wasn't quite that cheap. He was more of a pick 150 guy, and that extra 3 or 4 rounds makes a pretty big difference. So while if he'd been healthy and got his 20 saves, I would have been really happy to get him where I got him in that auction, or $8-10.
Yeah, I don't really want to buy into a committee with my second closer, right?
Yeah, I think it was just a little bit too early. I think this is generally where you want to be with your third, if you can be. Otherwise, you do have to take 2 shots and hope that you're you're good at this, because it's very.
I'm also not taking 2 shots into the same bullpen. I guess if it's like my final pick, like we're talking about like real deep, my last pick, because there is the last 10 picks of your draft, you might have 1 or 2 of those guys that make it to the end of the season with you, right? So if you're talking about a 25th round pick and it's like, oh, I took Andres Munoz ahead, like I took Paul Sewald, let me just take Andres Munoz here or something. I forget who it was that we all thought would fight for saves there. Like Ken Giles was in there. Yeah. So I think if you had taken Paul Sewald as your third closer, it'd be okay to take Ken Giles in one of your last 3 picks, maybe even last 5 picks, because a couple weeks in, you're like, well, now I can drop Ken Giles for a streamer or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a good way to look at it. And, obviously we're going to look at these players in the preview in greater detail too. So if we didn't talk about a particular reliever that intrigued you this year or intrigues you next year, don't worry. There will be a time for that.
Especially a lot of these waiver wire helium guys, like, Clay Holmes is going to be an interesting discussion in terms of looking forward. Should he be in that circle of trust? And
Bautista is easier, I think, because there's a clearer pattern of usage and the Yankees make things complicated.
What if he ends the season with knee surgery? How much does that matter? Because you could just replace the words Camilo Doval with Felix Bautista earlier too, which now has made our circle of trust 9 deep, which makes me think Hader and Presley are not in the circle of trust.
You really want to kick those guys out.
Just saying.
Yeah, well, I hate it. Multiple someones will disappoint us, so trying to figure out who they are is better than just being disappointed by them and walking right into the traps.
But if I wait, it to me, the best, my best approaches this year was getting Jordan Romano in like the 6th round, 5th round. Sixth round. I think mostly 6th round. Jordan Romano in the 6th is what I want to repeat. Jordan Romano in the 6th, that sounds to me like Camilo Doval or Felix Bautista in the 6th. So it's just, that it's all lining up in that same way. It's a young guy, small sample. My metrics love him. Seems like he's got the job. He's not going to drop in velo next year. Unless it's from like 101 to 100 for Felix Bautista.
He'll be all right at 100. I think it's still going to be good.
I think it's still going to be good.
I think it's still going to be swing and miss stuff.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
A couple emails to get to real quick on our way out. This one comes from Rob. Rob wanted to know, do teams have a professional pinch runner role? They were looking at ways the Mets could make room on the roster when they promoted Francisco Alvarez, and they started talking about Terrence Gore. 43 career stolen bases and 80 plate appearances.
I think he has like 7 rings. I'm not even kidding.
No,
come on, hold on.
Seven.
How many World Series rings does Terrence Score have? Look,
Doesn't have more than 2.
It auto completed for me. Oh, okay.
You've searched this before.
It's 2.
How long do you think he's played?
Well, in my defense, it's recency bias because he has one in 2020 and 2021. So like, it does feel like he's had them forever.
That's ridiculous.
That was pretty good. 7, 2. It's 2.
So how many teams have
so
players
the thing
like
about
this?
The thing about professional pinch runners is this: nobody has them during the course of the season, but they all want them in October. So, Billy Hamilton ends up like bouncing around, DFA'd, released, signs on, minor league, and the reason is Billy Hamilton is your Terrence Score right now. Is your other option at a Terrence Score, but nobody really wants to play him during the season in terms of where the job is like winning every day. They want him for one play in October, the Dave Roberts play. You know what I mean? Like they want that moment, and it becomes a little bit more valuable in the way you construct your roster for the postseason, where there's more rest days and more things you can finagle. So. They do have professional pinch runners. They do exist. They mostly only exist in October.
Rob, trying to be your friend, comes up with maybe this is what Esteury Ruiz can become with a smiley emoji.
Sorry, that's wouldn't that make you mad?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
It would make me very.
All right. I don't know if I'm that down on his stories, but maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for the email.
Thanks, dude.
Really appreciate that. Multiple emails trying to clarify a point from our last episode. Kenny G plays the soprano saxophone. So thank you to Duncan and James.
Was a sax, but not the big one. It's not the big one. It's the little one, the little sax.
It's called a soprano sax. Let's proceed with the proper nomenclature of the saxophone.
Not little one.
Not the little sax.
He plays the little sax.
Plays the little sax. Like, no. That's not what Kenny G plays. It's a soprano sax. So again, thank you to Duncan and James for clarifying that.
I really do apologize to the multiple jazz. It sounds like professionals that chimed in. I do like that we have multiple jazz professionals listening to this. So love you guys.
I guess tin whistle based on your description. So we clearly need all the help that we can get for something like this.
Not the clarinet.
No. So if you've got questions for a future episode, especially if they are review focused, that's where we're headed for these next several weeks. You can send those our way. ratesandbarrels@theathletic.com is the email address. You can find Eno on Twitter @EnoSaris. You can find me @Derek Van Riper. If you'd like a subscription to The Athletic and you don't have one already, $1 a month for the first 6 months. That can't be around much longer. Get it at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. It's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you next week.
Thanks for listening.